Hey everyone! Just a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button if you're enjoying my stories. It really helps me know you're into the content. Thanks for tuning in, and let's dive right in. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow across the nearly empty store. The mall was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you feel like you were the only one in the world. I hated that feeling. I glanced at the clock above the stockroom door. 12:45 a.m. I had been here for hours already, but my manager, Judy, had asked me to stay a little longer tonight. Urgent delivery, she had said. She needed someone to unpack the new stock and set it up for the morning rush. Of course, it was me. Always me. I wasn't thrilled about working overtime, especially after the long day I'd already had. All I wanted was to go home, take a hot shower, and fall into bed. But I couldn't say no. Not with Judy's eyes on me, her stern face telling me I had no choice. You'll get paid for it, at least, I reminded myself, though the thought didn't bring me any comfort. The mall had started to shut down around me. The faint sounds of the night shift security guard walking down the hallways were the only company I had now. It was just me, the empty store, and the low hum of the overhead lights. I tried to focus on the boxes in front of me, peeling off the tape, pulling out the clothes, and placing them on the racks. But my thoughts kept drifting. I wondered how my boyfriend Chris was doing. He'd texted me earlier, but I hadn't replied. I was too wrapped up in work, and the longer I stayed here, the worse I felt about ignoring him. I'll text him when I'm done, I promised myself. I stuffed the thought of Chris back into my mind as I moved on to the next box. It was almost 1 a.m. now. I was starting to lose track of time, my movements becoming automatic as I hung the clothes on display. The silence of the mall was unnerving, like the whole place had gone to sleep except for me. Even the overhead lights seemed to flicker and hum more than usual, their dull glow casting strange shadows across the store floor. I shivered, rubbing my arms to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up on me. It didn't help that the mall's air conditioning system was on the fritz again, making the air feel thick and heavy. I pulled the sleeve of my hoodie down further over my wrist, hoping it would block out the cold. It was 12:59 when I finished. I glanced around at the store, now fully stocked with fresh clothes ready for the next day's customers. I could leave. I locked the front door behind me and walked through the mall toward the parking lot. The place was dark now, only the distant glow of a few emergency lights breaking the complete silence. The hum of the lights above seemed louder here, echoing off the empty corridors. The quiet felt almost suffocating, like the mall was holding its breath, waiting for something. By the time I reached the parking lot, the last of the stores had shut their doors, and the lot was nearly empty. The few cars left were scattered across the pavement, their headlights casting long shadows against the gray concrete. My car was near the back. I could see it in the distance, the only car with its lights off. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, surprised to see a text message. Who would be texting me this late? I thought, unlocking the screen. It was an emergency alert. Emergency alert. Do not look up. I frowned, the words flashing in bright red. I didn't know what to make of it. Must be a test or something, I thought. I wasn't too concerned, but the tone of the message felt off. Something about it made my stomach tighten. Before I could think too much about it, I felt it. A sudden burst of light that lit up the entire parking lot, as if someone had turned on the sun in the middle of the night. I froze. The light was blinding. It wasn't from any car. It wasn't from a street light. It was too bright, too unnatural, too wrong. I instinctively raised my hand to shield my eyes, but it was pointless. The light was everywhere, and I couldn't escape it. I turned around, trying to get to my car, but the parking lot seemed to shift around me. I couldn't even see where my car was anymore. I was disoriented. The light was like a physical thing, pressing against me, making it hard to breathe. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, panic setting in. It was like something out of a movie, the kind where you knew everything was about to go horribly wrong, but you couldn't look away. I stumbled forward, trying to find my bearings. The mall seemed so far behind me, and the light, it felt like it was following me. My legs grew heavier, my steps more erratic. Why can't I see my car? I turned in circles, desperately searching for it. But all I saw was light. Everything was blinding white. The panic was overwhelming now, and I felt dizzy, my breath quickening. I couldn't take it anymore. I froze. I blinked hard, trying to clear the blurriness from my vision, but it didn't help. The light was overwhelming, intense, and my heart started to race. What the hell is this? My head spun with confusion. It didn't feel right. Nothing about it felt right. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a small sensation that should have felt normal, but only added to the strange panic I felt crawling up my spine. I pulled the phone out, distractedly unlocking it, still squinting against the piercing light. A new emergency alert flashed on the screen. Emergency alert, do not look up. I stared at the message, blinking rapidly, trying to understand it. My thumb hovered over the screen. What? What was that supposed to mean? The words were so abrupt, so terrifying in their simplicity, but I couldn't bring myself to worry about it. It was probably some weird test message or a glitch. The phone was still buzzing in my hand, but I just couldn't focus on it. I shoved it back into my pocket and looked up again. Big mistake. The light was blinding, and it was everywhere. It wasn't just overhead anymore. It was filling the entire parking lot. I looked around, instinctively raising my arm to block my eyes, but it was useless. The light was coming from all directions now, like I had stepped into some kind of spotlight that wrapped around me. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, an immediate reaction to something that made no sense. My heart began to hammer in my ribs, and my breath came in short, panicked gasps. What the hell is happening? I scanned the sky. Was it a helicopter? A drone? No, it was too big for that. Too bright. There was nothing above me I could make sense of. The air felt heavy, thick, like it was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. Every step I took felt like I was wading through some invisible force, something that made me feel like I wasn't just walking but fighting my way through it. I need to get to my car. The thought was immediate, desperate. I turned quickly and started running toward where I thought I had parked, my shoes slapping against the asphalt with each step. The sound was muffled, almost drowned out by the unnatural, suffocating brightness around me. The air itself seemed to hum with static. I didn't dare look up again, but I could feel the heat of the light seeping into my skin, making my face flush. My car should have been just ahead, a few more steps, a few more breaths. But as I ran, the parking lot seemed to distort around me. I looked, but I couldn't see it. My car, where was it? It had been right there, just a few steps away. Everything was wrong. The parking lot had grown impossibly wide, the rows of parked cars stretching out further than they should. I was losing my sense of direction, unable to find anything familiar. My legs started to feel like lead, like they didn't belong to me anymore. Each step was heavier than the last, my chest tight and full of dread. No, no, no. I panicked, spinning in a circle, trying to find anything. My car, my car, my car. But all I saw were endless stretches of pavement and empty spaces where cars should have been. Everything around me felt like it was collapsing inward, the blinding light pressing closer, filling my vision until there was nothing else. The air seemed to vibrate with a strange kind of energy that made my skin crawl. I forced myself to move again, desperate, frantic. I ran in what I hoped was the right direction, but the parking lot was like some maze, shifting and changing with each step I took. Every turn seemed to lead me deeper into the chaos. I can't breathe. I can't see. What is this? I stumbled forward, my mind spinning as my body failed to keep up. My vision began to blur, the edges of everything warping like I was looking through a foggy glass. My thoughts scattered like pieces of a puzzle, but nothing made sense anymore. I was so close. So close to what? I don't even know. My feet dragged across the pavement, and the darkness started creeping in. My heart was still hammering in my chest, but everything felt distant now, like I was moving through someone else's dream. The light was still there above me, suffocating. It pulled at me, dragging me further from everything I knew. I was almost there, almost at my car. But then, the world tilted. The ground disappeared beneath me. I couldn't keep my balance. I tried to catch myself, but it was too late. My vision went black, my legs gave out, and the last thing I felt was the cold concrete against my skin before everything went silent. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was how quiet it was. The blinding light had faded, and the world was shrouded in darkness again. It felt like I was waking from a nightmare, but my body was telling me it wasn't. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I could feel it in my bones, a cold kind of dread crawling up my spine. I sat up slowly, my head spinning as I tried to orient myself. My eyes blinked rapidly, adjusting to the lack of light. The parking lot around me was eerily still. It was almost like the whole world had been paused. My car. I turned to look, and there it was, my car, right in front of me. It had been far off before. How did it get here? The once familiar outline of the vehicle now felt alien. Was I imagining things? I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake the fuzziness from my brain, but nothing seemed to make sense. The clock on my phone was blurry at first, but when I managed to focus on it, I couldn't believe what I saw. Hours had passed, at least 4. The last time I had looked at the time, it was barely 1 a.m. Now it was well past dawn, a hollow light creeping over the horizon. But the parking lot, it shouldn't be this empty. My stomach churned, my pulse quickening. The mall should be opening soon, but there was no sign of anyone. No workers, no cars, nothing. I forced myself to my feet, my legs shaky as if I had been asleep for far longer than I actually had. I stumbled toward my car, trying to shake off the disorienting feeling that had settled over me. Once inside, I slammed the door shut, the silence pressing down on me from all sides. My hands were trembling as I reached for my phone, hoping for something, anything, that could make sense of this nightmare. I unlocked the screen, my heart racing as I scrolled through the notifications. There were 2 emergency alerts. The first one made my stomach drop. Emergency alert, do not look up. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My hands were shaking as I swiped to the next alert. Emergency alert, do not leave any buildings or be outside. What the hell was going on? I stared at the screen for a long moment trying to process the words, but nothing made sense. I couldn't focus. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. What happened? What was that light? What was I even doing here? I tried calling Chris. My fingers fumbled over the screen as I dialed his number, the familiar buzzing sound of the dial tone filling the car. But after a few moments, the line went dead. No answer, no signal. Panic gripped me, sudden and suffocating. I tried again, but my phone couldn't find a signal. No bars, nothing. I slammed my phone down on the dashboard, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The world felt like it was closing in on me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Where was everyone? I tried to calm myself down. It's fine, it's just some weird glitch. The signal will come back. But deep down, I knew it wasn't fine. Something was wrong. Something was so deeply wrong. I shoved my phone back into my pocket and turned the key in the ignition, desperate to get out of here. But the engine only sputtered once before going silent. I tried again. Nothing. What the hell? My breath hitched in my throat. The car had worked fine just a few hours ago. What had happened? I banged my fists against the steering wheel, frustration flooding my body, but all it did was make the silence feel even more suffocating. I had to get out of here, but how? I opened the door and stepped out of the car, the cold air hitting my skin like a slap. I hadn't noticed how quiet the world was until now. The silence felt unnatural. The usual hum of distant traffic, the sounds of people, none of it. Just empty stillness. I turned around slowly, looking at the parking lot. It was so vast, stretching out in all directions, but there were no other cars, no lights, nothing. It was as though I was the only person left in the world. The emptiness was so profound, it felt suffocating, like the world itself had been erased. It felt like everything was on pause. I could feel the panic bubbling up again, a hot wave creeping up my throat. I needed to leave, to find someone, to make sense of this before it drove me insane. But where? I turned, looking back at the mall, but even that looked different now. The glass doors, usually so inviting, seemed like a barrier, like the last place I should be. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. But by what? Who? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but no matter how much I tried to convince myself I was just overreacting, the knot in my stomach tightened. Something was off. Something had changed, and I didn't know how to fix it. I needed answers. But where would I find them? The silence was suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The mall parking lot stretched out in front of me, empty and barren. A hollow space that should have felt comforting, but instead made my skin crawl. I stood frozen in place, trying to will myself to do something, anything, to break the growing sense of dread curling up inside of me. But what could I do? I had no idea where to go or who to turn to. Everything felt wrong. The air felt wrong. It felt like the world was waiting for something. Don't look up. The words echoed in my mind, the warning from the emergency alert, the one I had dismissed earlier. But now, standing there in the eerie stillness, it seemed like the only rule that mattered. It had to be important. Don't look up. It was like a command, a last desperate attempt to keep people safe. But, of course, curiosity is a dangerous thing. My eyes slowly drifted upward. Against every instinct I had left, the air around me seemed to thrum with anticipation, and the moment I looked up, I felt my breath catch in my throat. I couldn't pull my eyes away. I couldn't look down. The sight above was too overwhelming, too impossible to ignore. It wasn't just one ship. It was hundreds. Massive, angular shapes filled the sky, so high up I couldn't even fathom their size. They hung there, suspended in the air like they were part of the very atmosphere itself. They weren't clouds or weather formations. No. These things were ships. Alien vessels, hovering above me with a quiet, almost suffocating presence. They were so strange, so wrong that it was hard to wrap my mind around the fact that I was actually seeing them. Their shapes were unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Sharp, jagged lines that cut through the night sky, flickering lights on their surfaces like strange stars. A chill ran down my spine as I tried to comprehend what I was seeing. This was no plane, no helicopter, no drone. These were ships. Alien ships. And then, just as I was starting to process that horrifying reality, the sky erupted in a cascade of light. Beams of brilliant white light shot down from each of the ships, covering the earth in an unnatural glow. It wasn't like a searchlight or a flare. The beams pulsed, flickering in and out like they were scanning something or someone. The light didn't seem like a weapon, but it had a presence, like it was marking something, searching for something. I couldn't move. My body was frozen in place, paralyzed by what I was witnessing. It was as if the earth itself was being studied, inspected from above. I felt sick to my stomach, an unsettling sensation that something was wrong beyond any explanation I could come up with. The beams of light seemed to be focusing on specific spots on the ground, shifting like they were targeting locations. They flickered with an eerie intensity, sweeping over the parking lot, the city, the earth itself. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the sky. I didn't want to know what was happening, but I couldn't stop myself from watching. I knew something was happening, something that didn't belong in this world. The beams of light grew brighter, more insistent as they moved over the land, slowly cutting through the darkness, pinpointing places in a way that felt like they were marking the earth. I couldn't help but think of those emergency alerts, those strange, terrifying messages. Do not look up. Do not be outside. But here I was, breaking every rule and staring up at the sky, and I could feel the weight of what I was witnessing pressing down on me. This was no accident. This wasn't some freak event. This was deliberate. I could hear it then. Faint, distant cries. High-pitched, desperate screams carried by the wind. They were far off, too far for me to make out exactly where they were coming from, but they were there. And they were unmistakable. I wasn't alone. Someone else had seen it too. Maybe they had looked up too. The sound of those cries only deepened the dread in my chest. Who else was out here? How many had already seen what I was seeing? How many were going through the same paralyzing terror? I stumbled backward, still rooted in place by the weight of the scene in front of me. My heart was hammering in my chest. I felt a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. But even in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. Whatever this was, it wasn't just an alien ship. It wasn't just a light show. It was a warning. And it was far from over. I couldn't breathe. I didn't even know if I wanted to breathe. My chest was tight, like I was suffocating beneath the weight of the sky, the ships, the beams of light. Everything was happening so fast, but it felt like time had slowed down. I couldn't look away from the lights, couldn't look away from the terror spreading across the land. But then, without warning, it came. A voice. Not from the sky. Not from anywhere around me. It wasn't a sound at all. It was in my mind, and it hit me like a thunderclap. You have seen us. Now, we will take what we came for. The voice wasn't warm or compassionate. It was cold. detached. And as it echoed through my mind, I felt the weight of its meaning settle in. It wasn't a warning anymore, it was a declaration. I had seen them, and now they were going to take whatever they came for. Take what? The thought barely had time to form before the realization hit me with gut-wrenching clarity. The lights, those beams of blinding light, they weren't just scanning, they were collecting, absorbing. But what? What could they possibly want from us? From me? I felt sick. The thought of being taken, of being collected like some kind of object, clawed at my insides. My mind raced in a panic. Am I the only one left? Had I been spared? Or was everyone else already gone? The cries I had heard earlier still echoed in my ears, distant and broken. Had they been taken? Or were they being changed? My heart pounded so hard it was almost deafening. Every inch of me screamed to run, to get out, to escape whatever this was. But my legs felt like lead, my body frozen under the weight of it all. Then I saw them. Figures. Slowly emerging from the shadows. At first, I thought they were just people, other survivors who had been hiding. But something about the way they moved, slow, mechanical, almost like zombies, made my blood run cold. They weren't running. They weren't screaming. They weren't fighting. They were simply walking toward the light. They moved like they were drawn by it, like they had no other choice. They were calm, like they were compelled. I watched as they moved in silence, their eyes wide, their expressions blank, and then my eyes caught one of them. A figure I recognized instantly. Chris. My heart skipped a beat as I saw him. He was walking toward the light, his face pale, his body stiff. There was something wrong with him, something horribly wrong. But it wasn't until I saw his eyes that I knew. They were glazed over, empty, lifeless. He didn't even look at me as I called out to him. Chris! My voice cracked as I shouted, desperate for him to turn around to show some sign that he was still him. But there was nothing. No response. No recognition. He just kept walking. I ran toward him, my legs moving before I even fully realized it. I reached out to him, grabbing his arm, trying to stop him. His skin was cold, unnaturally so, like it didn't belong to him anymore. I shook him, panic rising in my chest. Chris, please. But he didn't react. He didn't fight me. He didn't even acknowledge that I was there. That was when I realized what had happened. He wasn't human anymore. His movements were stiff and robotic, like a puppet whose strings were being pulled. He wasn't the boyfriend I knew, not the man I loved. He was something else, something changed. I stumbled back, horror flooding my veins. My heart pounded in my ears as I watched him, my hands trembling. He kept walking. Towards the light, towards the ships. And then I saw it. The others, there were more of them, walking like Chris, their eyes blank, their faces void of emotion. It was as if they had been turned into nothing more than empty shells, guided by an unseen force, a force that was shaping them, remaking them into something else. The ships, the lights, they weren't just abducting people, they were altering them. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. The aliens weren't just taking, they were transforming us. They were changing us into something else, something not human. I wanted to scream, I wanted to fight, I wanted to wake up from this nightmare. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed by the terror of what was happening, by the sight of my boyfriend, my Chris, walking away as if he didn't even know me, as if he didn't even care. I tried to move, tried to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. I couldn't escape, and I couldn't fight what was happening. I was too late. I couldn't save him. The air around me was thick with the weight of the moment. The sky above pulsed with that eerie light, the beams that had swallowed my world and everything in it. The ground beneath my feet felt like it was made of glass, ready to shatter at any second, and all I could hear was the dull hum of the alien ships hovering overhead. I stood frozen, torn between two impossible choices. The figures around me continued their slow march toward the light. My boyfriend, Chris, was one of them. His face, expressionless and void, drifted further into the distance, his body moving without any trace of the man I knew. I could still see the remnants of him, but they felt distant now, nothing but a ghost of who he used to be. And yet, there was nothing I could do. I had no choice but to face the cold truth. He was lost. The decision was suffocating, pressing in from all sides. I couldn't go back to the mall. It was over there. The building, the walls, the safety that I'd once relied on, gone. The light from the ships was consuming everything. There was no place to hide, no sanctuary to run to. My survival was tied to the path ahead, to the unknown that was pulling everyone forward. The thought of following the others, of becoming like them, felt like surrender. But what was left for me? I couldn't go on, paralyzed by grief and fear. I had to move, I had to survive. And so, with a heart heavy with loss, I made my choice. I stepped forward. The first step felt like walking toward my death. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't defiance. It was a choice made out of sheer necessity. The other figures around me, all moving in unison, their faces blank, their steps steady, made it clear that I was not alone in this. But I didn't know if that comforted me or deepened the horror. I looked up again, toward the ships, the light growing brighter with each passing moment. As I walked, I noticed the faces of the others more clearly. Some were like Chris, expressionless, empty, their eyes lost behind a veil of glass. But a few had a flicker of recognition, a glimpse of their former selves, as though their minds were still there, trapped beneath the transformation. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to scream to them, to tell them to run, to fight. But it was no use. They were already lost. Like Chris, they were already gone. And then, as if reading my thoughts, I heard the voice again, this time more urgent, more final. Those who remain are not worthy. The words rang in my head, louder than anything else. And for a brief, fleeting moment, I wondered what that meant. Are we not worthy? What was this thing that had taken everything from me? What were they doing to us? What had they come for? But those questions didn't matter anymore. The final decision was already made. The light ahead of me had reached its peak. It was so bright now, so all-encompassing, that I could no longer tell where the sky ended and the ground began. It was as if the universe itself had folded in on itself, and I was being drawn into it. I knew this was the end, whether it meant death or something worse. I couldn't tell. All I could do was walk. And as the light grew, a silence fell over everything. My footsteps, the cries of those around me, everything faded into nothingness. I reached the light. The world went silent. I didn't know if I died then, or if I became part of something else. I didn't know if I was still human, or if I had already been transformed into something new. All I could feel was the cold embrace of the light as it surrounded me, swallowing me whole. And then, nothing. It was as though I ceased to exist. Or maybe, just maybe, I became something else entirely. Something not human, something not me. The thought lingered, but then the nothingness became everything. And I was no more.